Hello, I'm joined today by the Lumos Diagnostics CEO, Doug Ward, to discuss the company's recent quarterly activity statement and cash flow report and the notable achievements and milestones from the past quarter. So I'll start by saying welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Jane. Really appreciate it and good to see you.
You too. Okay, so I want to just say up front, we're about to talk numbers. So worth mentioning, all the financials that we'll discuss in this session are in US dollars. They're also unaudited numbers. So Doug, the quarter that you've just reported, which was Q3 of FY24, was a very strong result for Lumos, and congratulations in that regard. You've recorded revenue of US $4 million for the quarter, which was up 135% on the prior quarter. Can I ask you to start by providing a quick summary of that revenue makeup?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We're very, very pleased and, with the growth that we saw, 135% quarter on quarter, which I would stress, right, back in February when we were there in Australia and talking to investors, we did let people know that we did expect the second half of the year to be a much more, growth-oriented experience for the company compared to that first half of the year. So we're really, really pleased that we executed as we had expected. Listen, we had a number of drivers, which is really a wonderful thing for the company after kind of our struggle in years past. We saw revenue really driven by, three major areas of our business. The first being the transformational agreement that we signed in January with Hologic, right? That has two agreements, an IP agreement as well as a development agreement, and that really centers around us developing a next generation of their current fetal fibronectin test that they market globally for Hologic. And I'd love to talk more about that a little bit in perhaps later on. But the bottom line is that, right, we get $10 million for the IP agreement. We received the $5 million already, and part of that was recognized. And maybe because, people will probably want to know, well, how are we recognizing that revenue? The payments, the IP payments, maybe we can talk about that in a little bit, probably. The second area that's driving our revenue is product sales. And it's nice to see the amount of sales that we did have. We had about $700,000 US dollars in sales of product revenue, Vodex and Febex, which is just terrific, right? I think that was up something like 250% over prior quarter. Really, really excited to see that growth start to impact our revenue line. And then lastly, it's our bread and butter as a business, which is our services revenue. We do a number of projects with companies like Apotec, Eldon, Burnett, Micropack, and others. And we continue to drive that product line. And I would say the vast majority of what we did in last quarter, we see those projects continuing for the coming period. So very excited about really the revenue growth and really starting to hit on three different ways to achieve that revenue.
That's excellent. It's really exciting to see that starting to build out. You mentioned Hologic, and I think wanting to come back and chat about the accounting treatment for those payments. So perhaps we can stop there for a sec. Can you step us through that and also perhaps the cash flow highlights from that last quarter?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to talk through this with you. It gets a little bit complex on occasion. And I would say that the way that we're going about with revenue recognition is aligned with our auditors, right? So that we've received their advice, and that's how we're treating this. So again, we have this IP agreement $10 million, non-refundable. We received the first payment in January. We will receive the second payment in by end of June of end of this fiscal year, right? June 2024. So what we have done, because this is also in association with a development agreement, right? And we signed the first, $4.7 million agreement for feasibility of development, which, if I may, I'm just going to sidebar for a second here and I'll come right back. Listen, things are going really well with our feasibility work. And I think that, from what I'm hearing from the teams and so forth, from both Hologic and from us, both teams are working well together. We're really pleased, and we anticipate to be able to hopefully give an update on that in the near future about some of the progress that we're making together. Now back to the treatment for this. So because of this is a development agreement, we're now recognizing this 10 million, if you will, over about a 20-month period, I believe is what we're going to use. So what you did see in our numbers was about 1.5 million of revenue from Hologic. Some of that came from IP revenue recognition, but some of that also is recognition for the development work as well. So that's how we're treating this, and I think it's really important for people to understand that has a it's a pretty well thought out and appropriate way to recognize this revenue going forward. Just staying on top of the cash flow in general, people always ask a few questions about that, so I'd love to just, we did generate, I think, around 6.7 million in receipts for the quarter. This was up about 1.1 from the previous. You can appreciate included in that is the 5 million from the Hologic agreement, but that then does mean that we had another 1.7, so that was an increase of 1.7 over 1.1 from the previous quarter. So I think, pretty good receipt growth, even outside of that IP agreement, if you will. We were actually cash flow positive for the quarter, first time, I think, in the company's history, I believe. So we're positive 2 million, and a significant improvement over prior quarters, and especially the last quarter of a 2.8 usage in cash, actually. So we sat at the end of the quarter at about 3.4 million. And again, we expect that we'll receive another cash influx of the 5 million from Hologic here, by the end of June.
That's excellent. And again, I'll just bookend the original statement around numbers to remind people that those numbers are all in US currency. So looks even better if you're an Australian. So well done. Okay, so thanks for running us through the numbers. Now, so more detail on the financials is obviously in the quarterly report, but we might now move on to a couple of operational highlights. So can I ask you to firstly take me through the launch of Febex in the US and Europe, and the commercial opportunities linked to the new agreement signed with Henry Schein for distribution in the US?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jane. Listen, Febex is a really, really important product for Lumos Diagnostics. And for those of you who may not be totally familiar with this product, it's a proprietary test by Lumos that allows the physician to be able to use whole blood at the point of care, basically differentiate, does someone have a bacterial infection or a non-bacterial infection in the US. Ex-US, we can say bacterial versus viral. But the bottom line is, right, many times docs do not know, hey, do you have a bacterial infection? Should you get antibiotics? Or do you have a virus infection? And if you have virus infection, you should not receive antibiotics. So this test, first in class to do what it does in the point of care, and we're really, really thrilled that this received FDA clearance, right, back in July of last year. And we have really spent the entire, second half of the calendar year in 2023 getting that product up and running in our manufacturing and building up, inventory and getting that on the shelf so that we could start to take orders in December, basically, of last year. We started to then ship product to customers in January of this year in the US. As you said, we do have this wonderful relationship with Henry Schein. They've done a wonderful job in driving sales and revenue outside of the US, right? UK, they expanded into various markets, right? Spain, Netherlands, and others. And this calendar year in February, we signed an extension to that agreement to have them sell the product in the US as well. So we're thrilled about that relationship with Henry Schein. Certainly they're one of the best distributors in the healthcare field, and we really do appreciate that relationship. Having said that, though, I would say that in addition to Henry Schein, who is very, very good, you do look for multiple partners to drive this product into the market. And one of the big reasons you do that is this product is unique. So doctors need to be educated and influenced relative to understanding what this test can do to aid them in their diagnosis and treatment decisions. So that takes dialogue, and it takes a little bit of time and presenting data and so forth in order to convince them to try a new test and use that to see if that can help them. So we are in active dialogue with a number of very large, significant, what I'd call US diagnostic companies. And we are keen to try to move those forward and try to get those signed, by the end of our fiscal year this year, to try to get them ready to go and start to bring that product to market for next fall here in the US. So we're really, really thrilled about some of the opportunity, if you will, that we have in the US here with additional partners other than just Henry Schein. And then lastly, I would just say, I mentioned how important data is. We did have an announcement recently of a significant study that was done in Barcelona in regards to 216 pediatric patients. And in that study, the nice takeaway conclusion from the study was, hey, this is a good test that really does help the physician diagnose whether or not the patient should get those antibiotics. And an added bonus, which, right, we certainly don't represent in our labels, but in their use, they were actually able to eliminate unnecessary chest X-rays in those kids, which is really a nice added benefit, I think, that the doctors discovered in working with the test. So we're really thrilled with Febex. Febex for us is the flagship product, right? And I'd go so far as to say the other thing that we're really spending a lot of significant time on is in discussion with the FDA here in the US, because we need to get our CLIA waiver. And we've aligned with the FDA around study design, and we do indeed wish to get that started as soon as possible. And our hope is that then that test would be in clinical trials during the next flu season, and then would have the label for the following flu season in 2026. Ultimately, having CLIA waiver, is a game changer for this company. It goes from 20,000 customer potential today to more than 200,000 in the future by having CLIA waiver label on this product. So that's a very exciting part that we continue to drive, Jane.
Terrific. Okay, well, thanks for that great summary on Febex. So let's move on to the other product in the armamentarium, so Vodex. Can you just explain this product? Also, let's just talk about that FDA emergency use authorization and the increased sales that you saw off the back of US flu season.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vodex is a test, again, just like significant like COVID tests that people have, where you do a swab of their nasal cavity. And this test is what's called multiplex. So it does 3 different tests in one, right? It does a COVID test, COVID-19. It does what's called flu A and flu B, which is influenza A virus or influenza B virus. And it's really important, right? Hey, do you have COVID? Do you have influenza A, influenza B? And there are different treatments that you would do for those. And it's important for the doctor to know and distinguish and differentiate between those tests. We did receive our emergency use authorization in September, which quite frankly at the time was a surprise to us. So that again took us a little bit of time to gear up stock and inventory, get it on the shelf. And we were able to get that one on the shelf by December of last year as well. Actually, it's been a terrific product, a lot of good sales. The majority of the sales that we did that I mentioned earlier, the $700,000 US dollars in sales, the majority of that is Vodex. And obviously the key reason is we entered during flu season. So we had flu season and we also had an extended flu season. So many times flu season's over by early March here in the US. And it certainly has extended into early April. Product did very, very well. Wish we had a little bit earlier in the year so that we could have met the demand, but pleased with the sales we did get. I can't say as flu season continues to wind down though, right, we will see that sales also decrease as you expect until flu season reappears probably in the September timeframe.
Makes sense. Okay, great. So let's turn to outlook. So you've noted that the key focus is on accelerating the growth of sustainable revenue. How should we put this into context, or the recent result into context, and where do you expect to see the growth come from as we look out from here?
Yeah, you're right, Jane. Absolutely. Growth is very, very important to the company. Loved what we were able to do in Q3. I think at the end of the day, we're expecting the drivers for our revenue to remain consistent with what they were in Q3, meaning we have Hologic, we have the IP agreement, and we'll recognize that revenue as I talked about how we will treat that. We have the development agreement, and we'll recognize that as the work is performed and so forth, and we meet deadlines and commitments. We'll have our products, both from a Vodex and Febex, but as I said earlier, right, we'll probably see a little bit less revenue, given the flu season's winding down here in the US. So it just makes sense that, we'd see that. And then lastly, we feel good about the base services business. It continues to operate and continues to move along. And those, I would say the vast majority of the work projects that we had in Q3 should continue into Q4. So we expect to continue to see a good revenue driven by all 3 areas of our business here in the final quarter.
Well, thanks, Doug. That sounds like a great place for us to wrap it up. Congratulations again on a strong result, and thanks for making time to speak today.
It's a pleasure, Jane. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Look forward to further updates in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.